Hi everyone, welcome to this ICW webinar hosted by ICF France about coaching, digital platforms, and a great survey they have run. Let me introduce you today, or two lovely ladies presenting this session. First of all, I will start with Edith Coron. Edith is a senior executive coach, PCC, a coach supervisor and author based in Paris. She brings to her work the scope and depth of more than 30 years of an exceptional global professional career, spanning 4 continents and stretching from her early years as a war correspondent in Central America to her certification as the first qualified coach supervisor in mainland China. Edith chairs the ICF France Committee on Digital, Artificial Intelligence and Coaching. She, com- she contributed a chapter on these topics to the Coaches Handbook, Routledge, October 2020. Welcome with us, Edith. I'm also pleased to present you today Sarah Thevenet. Sarah is an ICF ACC certified coach, and she's an active member of the ICF France Committee on Digital, AI, and Coaching. She has contributed to several workshops and webinars for ICF France, such as Augmented Intelligence, How to Use Data for an Augmented Coaching Posture, and AI Digital and its impact on the coaching profession. A workshop held with Edith Coron at the ICF France training, Away Day in January 2020. Sarah is also responsible for the training course on ethics and digital AI at the ESSCA School of Management for third-year students. Welcome, Sarah. It's an honor for us to have you with us today, and I'm going to give the floor now to Edith for the presentation.
Thank you very, very much, Isabel, and thank you, Rainer, who's also here in the background. And I would like, well, since we're just starting, to also extend my thanks and gratitude to the colleagues with whom we have worked on this coaching platform, the survey on the coaching platform. I will just share my screen while I'm talking as well. And the people who were involved, hosted by ICF-EMEA, Rainer Prattel, were also Richard Grillenbeck, whom I can see is among the participants from ICF Germany, and Boris Pridmore from ICF UK, and of course, Sarah, who's here with us today. So this is an important aspect because the fact that it's a collective endeavor is meaningful, starting from chapter levels and reaching a collaboration among several European chapters, and with the support of the ICF Global, particularly the Joel DiGioralino and Coaching Science team. So why we decided to launch this survey, which was the interest, first of all, of the ICF France chapter. Let me just make sure that this is shared properly with you, is the fact that we could see that there were several trends. Obviously, we started it in the midst of the COVID confinements for many of us in different parts of the world, and particularly leading to remote work with our colleagues. So this is the background. However, we had observed that there was many quite significant inroads in terms of digital technology and innovation in the coaching profession. We observed that there were some large investments from investment funds coming into our world. If to give one example, BetterUp, you might have heard about this coaching platform, is evaluated, has an evaluation at about $1.73 billion and raised $125 million last February, which allowed BetterUp to hire as kind of a great marketing coup, Prince Harry of the UK. More seriously, there is also the fact that we have seen that in learning and development in large companies, coaches is more and more popular and is little by little being used instead of training. And last point, we have seen a large, significant increase in the number of coaches. The one ICF research conducted, published, I believe, earlier this year, indicated that coaching market is growing by 6.7% per year, has been growing in the last 3 years. So, and perhaps last element in terms of new coaches arriving on the market, just for France, which is where we're speaking from, we have counted that there are 140 coaching schools on the French market. So that gives an idea of this conjunction of 4 factors is why we decided to look into the impact coaching platforms have on our profession. So this is the way it started, a joint endeavor with our colleagues, and we're very happy to share the results with you. I will let Sarah take the floor now.
Thank you, Edith. So if we go to the next slide, so indeed this survey has been done to get feedback from coaches about their experiences in using online coaching platform. But of course, what do we talk about when we say coaching platforms? So there are 2 types of platforms. First type is service platforms, typically using, for coach, those platforms offer services to coaches such as scheduling, coach and client matching, chatbots, perhaps access to psychometric assessment. And basically the coach to use those services has to pay a subscription. And the second type of platform is contracting platforms, where actually the platform offers coaches the opportunity to be connected with clients, and the coach is paid per coaching session or engagement. Of course, those platforms can be hybrid, so services can be included on contracting platforms, and people who reply to the survey were coaches who experienced one or the other type of platforms, or perhaps both of them. So if we move to the next slide, indeed, as Edith said, these platforms are developing and are growing with the pandemic. Indeed, we moved our business perhaps for some of us more online than before. And these platforms do attract coaches and are positioning themselves firmly in our professional landscape. As it mentioned, better up hiring Prince Arias Chief Impact Officer. So the ICF-EMEA task force has been created to observe and analyze their impact on coaches and on the coaching profession. If we move to the next slide, very briefly, as Edith mentioned, we are speaking, both of us, from France. The ICF France Committee on Digital and Artificial Intelligence and Coaching was the first working group in any professional coaching association to be set up, and has played a key role in launching the ICF-EMEA task force and the survey. So if we go down to the survey on the coaching platform, so on the next slide, this survey was carried out in February and March 2021 through the memberships of the ICF France, Germany and UK chapters, but also through the ICF Global panel of volunteers. The purpose, again, was to actually assess the experience of ICF coaches, their experience in the use of those platforms, but also to think as ICF, which role should we play towards them? And in total, we had 237 respondents. And I will leave Edith to start and get into the nitty-gritty of the survey and the details.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, 237 valid answers. Altogether, we had 850 clicks on the link, which sent to a closure, basically, quite a few of the respondents, because we were interested deliberately in people who had an experience in coaching platforms. We wanted to get their feedback. We wanted to get their, their experience. So that's why we specifically targeted it to people with this experience. And for those of you interested, of course, it doesn't reflect the overall market because, as explained, we targeted it to the French, UK, Germany chapters plus the panel of volunteers of ICF Global. It leaves, unexplored, or whole continents, obviously. It is a first step, so we're very aware of it. However, because we worked with the coaching science team, we are able to present you something that stands quite, seriously in front of you. So I will just give you a little bit of the demographics. Not surprisingly, most of the answers came from English speakers from the US, UK, Northern Ireland, France, Germany, Netherlands, essentially are the four big groups. Then we have a whole array of other countries. Again, not that it's not interesting at all, but it was not targeted particularly at these people. However, through the various links, people living in these countries of residence have answered. So I will give you a little bit of the demographics, which it is quite interesting there. We see, I leave you to get a sense of what these figures mean, and you have the percentages there as well. In terms of years of coaching, what does it tell us? It tells us that the coaches who have answered the survey, meaning that they have experience with coaching platforms and they filled up the survey to the end so that we could work with the data, are people who are experienced in terms of their coaching from 6 to 15 years or 16 years even is the bulk of it. Coaches with 1 to 5 years is a smaller number. Secondly, another interesting piece of information there is that the bulk of the coaches who have answered are PCC. The 27% is ACC, MCC, a very small number, I think it's about 6%. However, so it tells us that most people are certified, and not only that, but they are in majority PCC. Education reflects pretty much the general statistics of the coaches of ICF, i.e. people with an education degree. The point about demographic information is the fact that people are quite old as well. The bulk are more than 40 years old. So there is a generational factor, and there is a level of experience, which tells us that there are several aspects to it. One is that the coaching platforms have deliberately been recruiting experienced coaches. Whether this will last, whether in the aim at democratizing coaching the way the platforms claim they wish to do, we will see more young coaches being included when basically coaching trickles down through organizations. This is a question to be asked, and some of us are not convinced of that. Some think that this stage where younger coaches might be brought into the coaching platforms might be simply skipped because technology will be finding its place even more strongly than it does now. So this is for the demographics. Obviously, comments, questions are more than welcome in the chat box, and I know Isabel will relay that to us. What is interesting here, there is what kind of qualifications are required. So, minimum number of hours of coaching, specific credential levels, coach training are all, that's what comes first, essentially, alongside with business experience, which is quite significant, and supervision comes quite low. I would be curious to know what you think of it and what kind of experiences you have had for those of you who have worked with the coaching platforms. whether you feel that it reflects your own experience in being selected by coaching platforms. One of the questions that is raised around this is the bona fide. In other words, how truthful this is, whether for example, the level of credential is valid, how much the platforms check on what the coaches claim, which are all important elements, in terms of the guarantee to the client, but also the guarantee for the coaches. I will pass the floor to Sarah for the next slide.
Edith, I have a question here, and I think it's coming up from everybody. What do you mean by platforms? Are you talking of technology platforms or something else? Maybe that would be important to get the hang of what is being discussed. So
yes,
if somebody could please help us with that.
Of course. I might just go back to a slide we used before to explain what we have been looking at, right? Sarah explained briefly that they are service platforms. Basically, they provide various services to the coaches. The difference we made is what the coach pays for, subscribes to, and gets services, and coach platforms that are brokers, essentially, between clients and the coaches. And the coach is paid by the platform. Obviously, some of the platforms include services. It's kind of hybrid format. They will, provide, way of keeping your log, using some tools, client journaling, psychometric assessments, etc., can be, client admin can be part of it. However, we did not include, and I hope it answers your question, we did not include, for example, chatbots, those which are only using bot system, programs that provide through voice recognition or text recognition, question and answers, a conversation between a program and a client. We looked at where human coaches were involved one way or the other. I hope it answers your question.
I'm afraid not. I would, for example, I use Qualtrics. I'm a coach from Singapore, and I work with Allianz in Singapore. And Qualtrics is a platform, technology platform that I use for running a coaching diagnostic. And it does everything that you said, but it's a part of it is paid and a part of it is free. So if you could name the platforms that you're talking about here, is it Workday, SuccessFactors, SurveyMonkey?
We'll get into that. This is not SurveyMonkey. For example, we will get into that in a minute, but there is a lot on the market there, right? So let's maybe that's where Sarah was going to come into, and hopefully we can explain that. Okay, so let me just give the floor to Sarah, and we haven't answered. We will try again. Okay.
Thank you, Edith. And yes, we'll aim at answering this question, hopefully. So if we go back, so we look at two types of platforms, okay? Contracting platforms, the coach is paid for an engagement for coaching a client, is recruited by the platform and is offered clients. And services, platform services, where the coach pay on a subscription basis and can use different type of services. So bearing in mind those two types of platforms that we looked at, and hopefully we will be more precise later to answer the question that just popped up. In terms of numbers of platforms used and tested by those 237 coaches, we see that 2/3 actually of these coaches have used or tasted one or two platforms, and most coaches are using currently just one platform, that's 62%. If we move on to the next slide, and hopefully that's where we can be maybe more precise in our answer as to what is a coaching platform, 57% of the coaches who have answered the survey are using contracting platforms. 11%, and that's an interesting figure, with a 24%. So 11% of the coaches who have answered the survey are saying they are using a platform which is video-based. So we can imagine Zoom, for instance. Zoom, for some coaches, is a coaching platform when it can be considered as merely a communication tool. So it shows, again, how attuned some coaches are with online coaching platform and the different levels of understanding of what is an online coaching platform. And indeed, there is a need to raise awareness on what actually exists. And among the profession and ICF, we need to come up and agree on a shared definition of what is an online coaching platform. And you were asking about names, and that's on the next slide. So we saw that indeed 3 main platforms came up. So Better Up, the one that recruited Prince Harry, as Edith said at the beginning, is an online coaching platform, is a contracting platform based in the US and used internationally. You've got also Coach Hub, which is born out of Germany and also used overseas, and Move One, which is an online coaching platform born in France and which is mostly used in France, but also to some extent overseas. So these Better Up, Coach Hub, and Move One are the 3 main platforms that came up when the coaches answered the survey and said, okay, this is the platform that I'm using. But perhaps to address, the earlier question and highlight the fact that many businesses are investing in, digital coaching, online platform. 66 out of 237, so 66 respondents said other platforms, and 18 said Zoom. So basically, this highlights again the need that we need to agree on what we consider online coaching platform, on perhaps the need to raise awareness on what exists on the market. And it will be very interesting as well in the coming years to see which platform strive and survive and which platform actually eventually disappear, because some things that indeed, some platform will merge with perhaps, a big one and a smaller one. It will be also interesting to see which technologies will be introduced on the platforms and which technologies actually will be left out. And if we look at the features in the platform on the next slide, what is also interesting here is that we see 17% of the respondents are saying, yes, the platform they are using is including an AI function. And actually, when we think of artificial intelligence, we may consider that AI is still in its early stage. Therefore, we wonder, okay, what those 17% coaches put behind the word artificial intelligence, and that's a piece of work that will be interesting to carry out. What is also interesting is that in terms of features on the platform, e-learning is integrated for 67% of the respondents, and that's actually is also interesting because platforms are offering coaching session, great. Platform are offering also e-learning session, e-learning modules, and how much time a client is spending in their coaching session, how much time a client is spending learning online, new materials, and one can wonder to what extent this blended offer, coaching and e-learning, can actually bring or increase confusion to actually what coaching is meant to be and what training is meant to be. E-learning indeed is a great additional tool for clients, but should we be aware and try to mitigate the risk of this ambiguity is the future of coaching, is there a risk to reduce coaching to a portion of the client development with, e-learning modules? If we move down to the valued, functions on the next slide. So here we're going to see why do we go to work for online coaching platforms. And a third of the respondents are saying, well, the most important function indeed is lead generation. Well, of course, what people want out of these platforms is business. Great. The second most important function is the fact that the platform is easy to use. It enables coaches to do business from their house through their computers, and other important functions are scheduling and client management. And by client management, we think of signing your contract with the client, sending the contract through the platform, getting the feedback forms from your clients, all these things which are very useful. But also other coaches mentioned matching as an important function, which indeed is interesting. And I will leave the floor to Edith to talk about ethics. Yes, indeed, we have a problem with the mic. So, Edith, can you take the mic again, Edith?
Sarah, the problem is solved. You can speak.
Okay. So, shall I carry on? I'll carry on. Good. So here on this slide, can we go back to ethics, maybe? Do we want to look at the ethic agreement? This is where, thank you. Basically on this slide, what we see indeed is that one of the questions was, is there an ethical agreement signed between the coach and the platform? And basically, yes, for 67%. And I see Edith can take the mic again.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for holding the fort, because I was on mute. Okay, so the ethics. Why did we ask questions about? Why did we look at this? Because we are ICF, right? And we are standard bearers in the coaching profession. And one of the pillars of our credo is ethical behavior, ethical framing. And this is actually the first competence, right, among the ICF competencies. So we looked at it, and yes, essentially coaches sign coaching ethics agreements. When it comes to the clients, though, that's a different story. And this is quite important because you see the yes, no, I don't know. The bulk of this is no, and I don't know, which it's a bit, it's a bit of a gray zone here. And we'll see why it matters when we deal with data in a minute. What I wanted to say as well, in terms of this coaching, the ethics agreement, there is a strong tendency for the coaching platforms to use the good names of coaching federations like ICF or EMCC and put the logos on the websites, on their websites, for example, on their platforms. And to my knowledge, no formal agreement has been signed between the coaching federations and these platforms to this effect. So we have to be, when it comes to ethics, the coach might sign an ethics agreement, but where does the ethical behavior start and where does it stop within the platform? So if we want to look at it more in a more granular way, we're going to look at the data because we're dealing with digital. Of course, we create data, tons of data. The moment you take an assessment online, the moment you fill up a questionnaire, the moment if the coaching sessions are recorded for the coachee and the coach, the client and the coach, for their personal, stepping back, thinking, monitoring, all these lovely things it can be, we can see as well that it creates a wealth of database, which is interesting for the coaching platforms themselves, because as we all know, right, from our mobile phones to our shopping online, we are the raw material. Our data is the new fuel of today for the digital industry. So coaching is no exception. However, when we're dealing with coaching, one of the pillars of our profession is confidentiality. So where does it start? Where does it stop? Very interestingly, there we can see in this graph that actually, before I say anything, can I have some reactions in the chat box? What do you see in that? What triggers your interest? Triggers any questions? And I look at the chat. Right. Yeah, I can see Zoom doesn't have an ethics agreement, but again, you see, Zoom is not what we consider a coaching platform. Zoom is just a communication tool. Very simple. Anybody uses Zoom, including people who are not coaches. But you're right, in terms of whatever we use online, it's always useful to look at the little, small characters. Definition for coaching platform is being used. Okay, well, obviously. So GDPR gives rules for these things. Yes, absolutely. If we are in Europe, where GDPR is highly implemented, there are lots of places where GDPR is not in place, right? So data is not confidential. Well, could be framed, but in this case, what I wanted to attract your attention to is the following. You have a percentage of people who don't know. The client gets the data, has access to the data. Great, fair enough, right? The coach has access to the data. Fine. Client is the individual person being coached. Where it gets a bit more worrying is the 11% of the client's organization, and obviously the 26% of the individuals working for the coaching platform organization. What are they going to do with this data? Who tells them what to do what? So this is a set of questions where we would like to have a little bit more transparency. We look at the contract terms and conditions as well, and I want to move on so that we have time for Q&A before the last piece of the presentation we want to share with you. The bulk of it is essentially, not surprisingly, on a freelance basis. 54% of the coaches working for coaching platforms, i.e. who are through the platforms, they get contracts, they get clients. It happens on a contract base, on a freelance base, which is not unlike Uber, for example, and the drivers. Some coaches are, regularly employed or have yearly contracts, etc., but the majority is not the case. So now we're talking money. Whether there is you work exclusively for a platform or not. Not surprisingly, no. I mean, people being on a freelance base, it would be hard, to be exclusively working for one platform more than another. And in terms of the fees, the bulk, remember, we have very experienced coaches, largely, and the bulk of the fees are up to max $200, right? The above $200 is 8%. So we have, a significant number of people being paid $30 to $80 per hour. Then you see the rest, right? But it's in any case below $200 an hour. And from what we know, most PCC coaches, for example, and MCC for this matter, are, when not online, are charging significantly more. We are aware that there are geographical different markets, geographical discrepancies in different markets, but this gives you an idea of where we are. The contract terms and conditions, this is an interesting element as well, because we ask people how much you get, from what the client pays, how much you get. We got very few answers to this question. So that indicates, and that's the way they spread, that indicates, one, potentially that people don't know. Or they haven't asked the question. That's also a possibility. But in essence, there is, because of the very low level of responses, we can see that it's a bit of foggy there. And there's certainly lack of transparency in the part of some of the platforms. However, when asked whether they're satisfied or not satisfied with the platform, the large majority of people who answered the survey are satisfied. Satisfied to very satisfied is the largest numbers. And which improvements would they like to see on the platforms? Not surprisingly, better pay and more matching. Feedback tracking is interesting, but essentially, and a little bit of transparency, 10%, the very transparency I was just talking about. So what should ICF role be in this? Should we be involved with platforms? Involved being very vague, right? We're going to try to define it in a moment. Yes, we should be involved. I mean, they're part of the landscape. We can't play the ostriches, right? Put our heads down. They're there. And lots of experienced coaches are working for them. So how should ICF be involved? The highest level of answer is ensure ethical practice. Good news, because that's a bit what we stand for. So that's great that we're, people knock at our door for the very thing we preach. The little flippant answer, which is create a platform, give us more work. Standards and guidelines and accreditation regulation. So essentially, we are asked to be in our role as a professional body. This is essentially what I wanted to share with you. And to let you know that this is the start. This survey is just the first time we took the time in terms of ICF, and at the European level, to look into this. We have not finished exploring the topic, far from it. We need to engage in conversation, with the coaching platforms. We need to engage with more different geographies, obviously. But maybe we can take a few questions now, Isabel, and then move into our guidelines.
Thank you, Edith. Well, there are plenty of reactions in the chat box. I will try and ask, I think this question keeps on coming, and you may not be naming them now, but some people are asking, can you name some of these digital platforms? Do you have concrete names to share with the audience, or is it going to be included in the report that they can have access to after the session?
Well, we as a matter of principle, we discussed that seriously, but among the team there, and we gave the names, the platforms that we mentioned in the report, in the presentation now is the same one that we mentioned in the report, naming them, because they're the one who appeared in the answers. We are not in the business of giving a list of all the platforms, because they can be very easily found on the internet, obviously. And part of, and again, with the difference of these service platforms and the contracting platforms and the blend and all the colors of the rainbow in between. But deliberately, because we are coaching federation, we are a professional body, we're not going to be naming platforms, because we don't want to be looking as we are advertising one platform rather than another. And it's not that we escape from it, but I hope you will understand that we don't want to be put in this situation. And that was not the purpose. We're not here to, to say who's good, who's bad. We're just here to analyze the data we managed to get, right? Yeah, Isabel?
Thank you, Edith. Another question that came also several times is, in your definition, does a coaching platform include a client database?
Include a client database?
Yeah, so in your definition, does a coaching platform, in your definition, include a client database?
The coaching platform will have its own database of clients, right? And it will assign coaches, specific coaches to specific clients. But the coaches, the potential looking for work, are not going to have access to the platform database. That's not the way it works. The coaches are being assigned. If we're looking at contracting platforms, right?
Thank you. Another question that came, there are also plenty of statements. There are no questions, but statements, but I'm happy to share them at some points if you haven't read them on the chat. But I have a question here that is, what is the driving factor for this platform survey? Why is it important for us as coaches to have client logos, ICF ethics agreement, etc.? These can be emailed separately or also put into the contracts we sign.
What I was referring to is the appropriation by the coaching platforms of our logos, for example. Without we need to have the guarantee to a certain extent, because it's a marketing tool, right? Being, ICF, it's a great name, it's a great marketing. It's a great marketing tool. So whether it's used appropriately or not, I think should be of concern to us, right? As an organization. Let me just pause for a moment, because I want to make sure that we have time to go through the guidelines, and then we can go back to questions.
Yes, well, do this, Edith. Do this, and we'll open up for another set of questions after that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Sarah,
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Edith. So indeed, the recommendations. So ICF, the ICF France Committee on Coaching and Digital AI has drawn up some recommendations with regards to deciding which coaching platforms do you want to work for. And there are merely, at this stage, guidelines, things that, you may want to take into consideration. Indeed, they meet ICF standards and comply with ICF Code of Ethics. And also, ICF Germany has released the checklist for coaches and clients, which is available on their ICF German website. I believe they exist in German. I'm not sure if they have been translated in English. But both ICF chapters, together with ICF UK and ICF Global, we are working on a common paper to give guidelines and streamline a common approach, because as we've tried to convey the message to you, there are different levels of understanding of what an online coaching platform is and what it means. Therefore, that's the reason why, in the chat, you have all those questions, and maybe it's a little bit blurry for you at this stage, because there are tons of them, and we're not too sure, what we are getting into when we work with them. So these are the sets of recommendations we put forward. From an ethical point of view, if we go down to the next slide, please. From an ethical point of view, you may want to ask yourself, does the platform ask you to sign a code of ethics? And if so, are you in agreement with its terms? You may also want to ask yourself, how is a coaching contract and defining objectives frame? Is it a four-way agreement between a representative of the client's organization, a platform employee, the coach, and the client? Is it a tripartite agreement between the client, the coach, and the client's organization? Or are the objectives agreed between the platform and the client? Also, has a platform put in place a feedback system? And do you have access as coach to the client's feedback following the coaching sessions? In terms of professionalism, if we go down to the next slide, you may want also to ask yourself, does the coaching platform require any particular level of qualification, such as specific credential level, a minimum number of working hours as coaches, coaching training, supervision? And also, does the platform ask you to provide evidence of such qualifications? Does the platform offer supervision to its coaches? And does the platform offer the client a number of coaches to choose from? Then if we move down to data management and confidentiality, does the platform allow coaching sessions to be recorded? And can you use these recordings for your own purposes, such as supervision, certification, self-monitoring? And as Edith mentioned, data, where are those, sessions stored on the platform database, and how is confidentiality guaranteed? What type of data does the platform monitor, and who has access to the data? How does the platform protect privacy? And do you know how and using which criteria the coaching platform matches coaches and clients? Is it through a computer program, an employee working for the platform, or a combination of the two? Do you know whether the platform ranks the coaches in its directory? Finally, if we look at the terms and conditions, what type of contract does the coaching platform offer? Is it open-ended, monthly, annually, per project? You have to pay to appear on the coaching platform directory? Does the coaching platform demand that you work for no other competing platform? Do you know what proportion of the fee that the platform charges the client it pays you? And are you satisfied with this share? And how and when can you cancel the coaching contract? And are you comfortable with these terms? And we can open up again maybe for question. And also we are very interested with Edith for your main takeaways, and Edith, I leave it to you to conclude.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say one thing. As I mentioned earlier, it's the first step, right? Why we did that, it's really to start diving into this reality, trying to find our bearings. And as we said, just at least asking ourselves some of the basic questions so that we can make informed choices about working or not working and in which conditions for coaching platforms. Because there is a little bit of a gray zone there, and we need to develop our literacy, understand there is a whole set of concepts. Obviously, we haven't even touched upon the whole AI, artificial intelligence impact, really on this. But, the impact of tools, what kind of tools do we bring into the coaching conversations, for example? Yes, indeed, it can be extremely helpful for coaches, but we need to be educated about them and make decisions in terms of the respective roles we give the tools, and we, human coaches, have. What is our added value? This, when you look at, the coaching as for what it is, there's kind of two big schools. There is a humanistic school of coaching that puts the human coach at the center and the relationship, which is what we say in our definition of coaching at ICF. It's a relationship between two individuals in the support of one person achieving their objectives. And there is also a very mechanistic, if you allow me this horrible word, way of approaching it, which is always a temptation, right? And it has existed prior to digital, where we had, lots of tools that we could use to support us. So it's really what we want to, the respective roles, which roles we want to give tools. And be very aware of our unique added value as human coaches. And finally, it goes back, coaching is no exception. We live in the big wide world, right? So all looking at this, doing this survey, it was like looking through a mirror. It sends us back a mirror. I mean, coaching reflects what's happening in the rest of the world, and it sends us, a mirror image of what coaching is or could be. And it is a philosophical question at the end of the day, the respective places of machines and human beings. So we are at a crossroad, and we just wanted to, share this and encourage all of us to make informed decision about what we want to do with this. So we're ready to take more questions.
Thank you, Edith. So I must say that I'm seeing more statements and affirmations in the chat box than questions. So if you have one or two last questions, can you please just drop them now? Because I think all previous questions have been answered. I think there are some interesting comments in here about the terminology that has been used, Edith. Some say that we are speaking about coaching aggregators and not platforms, and that it's about applications and not platforms. So just wanted to share that. I don't know if you want to develop on that.
Yeah, very briefly. Applications, let's start from the start. You can have in your telephone, and it exists, and we've been, talking to people who have developed such apps. It's a chat bot, it's a coaching bot where you have a program that engages through voice recognition or text recognition, like your Siri, if you use, this type of brand of telephone. It will answer your questions, right? And it has been programmed through, tree structure to have a whole set of scenarii through which it can carry on a coaching conversation. And it's getting, more and more developed because lots of work is being put in natural language processing, called NLP, where lots of work is being done. This is what we call coach bots, and they can be included into coaching platforms. Some coaching platforms offer, on an on-demand basis, a coach bot, an exchange with a machine, and also can provide a coach. You can be a coach that works in parallel with the coach bot, right? For example. So that's the thing. I know it is a little bit, we're all thrown into it, and so much of this digital world, is confusing for most of us. On top of it, because there is so much hype, so much marketing behind it. For example, it's fashionable to put AI everywhere. You put a little touch of AI, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and it is supposedly trendy. That's why it's really our duty as coaches to educate ourselves towards that.
Thank you. Another quick question, Edith. Will the questions of this survey be made available? So can people still access the questions?
No, the questions, no. There were 37 questions, but in essence, you got them because they appear, in the presentation we gave you, and you'll see it. And now I turn to you, Isabelle, because the report is ready and is already accessible on the French website in French. And I know that you have the English version, Isabelle, so I leave it to you to perhaps explain.
Yes, so thank you, Edith. So we will actually add the reports and the slide deck and the recording of this session on the event you registered for, and it will be on the archive section of the ICW event. So you'll always be able to get back to it and to download the reports there. Okay. I think there is another question that I'm just going to read something from Eva. So important question towards the end. To me, the tool I use are based on, is it about serving the client? There is research that some people trust chatbots with their deepest secrets more than real humans. As with everything in coaching, follow the client and what works for them. Some people open up more over the phone. Some may open up more to chatbots. So it's not really a question, but I think.
But it's a very interesting comment. Absolutely. Yes. Some people, we know that, for example, and it is extremely, it's an interesting development, and I saw it when I was living in Asia, based in China, robots with sophisticated programming and outside appearance were used to care for old people in nursing homes, for example. So this is a parallel for me, you know, and people were very happy to be interacting with their robot, right? So the point is whether people are happy to open up and follow the client. What I would say in terms of tools, what helps the self-awareness of the client, and very often these are self-awareness tools, the more the merrier, great. You know, whatever supports the client, I'm personally in favor of this because it saves us time where we can be uniquely of support to the client. Whether people will feel more comfortable talking to a program, a set of, you know, algorithm and data points powered by extremely powerful computers, maybe. Then it's a reflection on, you know, where our society is heading. Can we stop in a much upbeat note?
Well, in the current times, what are your views on a blended approach, digital and personal, human interaction type of coaching?
Yeah, maybe I'm Sarah, you perhaps want to say something there.
Yes, so in the current times, what are your views on a blended approach, digital and personal human interaction type of coaching? Again, I think, you know, it's going back to, I think it was Eva's point. What is better for the client and what, you know, also, you know, what, you know, as a coach, how comfortable are you as well with, you know, blending your approach digitally and as a human interaction. Personally, I think, you know, indeed the future will, I mean, as any market, okay, the coaching profession will be driven by clients' demand. If our clients are moving online and, you know, indeed are in demand of a blended approach, and if we want to stay on business, then of course we will need to, I guess we need to adapt, or we will need to then choose clients that, you know, match, you know, the way we do our work, and that's okay. I think, you know, the point is to be aware of what, you know, where we see things moving, because I've seen a comment in the chat as well on AI. I don't want to open up, you know, for a discussion on that because I'm aware of the time, but there are stuff existing in terms of, you know, facial recognition, you know, emotions. And if you throw that in, you know, an online platform tool, of course, you know, the definition is unclear and, you know, we're moving with that. I've seen your comments on the chat, but if you throw AI in, then, well, that's, you know, there is a lot of other questions coming up out of that. And as a coach, you know, where do you see yourself working and where are you comfortable? And as Edith said, you know, it's a society question. It's almost a philosophical question. And we will be very happy to, you know, have another round with you guys to discuss that.
Well, thank you very, very much, Sarah and Edith. I'm going to share the chat with you because there are plenty of very positive messages, of lots of interesting perspectives, great insight, very good start. Probably need to dig in more, a little bit more on that, but very thankful audience for starting this project, for sharing your views. So I really want to thank you again, Edith and Sarah from ICF France. Richard Gullenberg from ICF Germany was with us today. Rhino Prattle, all Strategic Development Director for Europe, Middle East and Africa at ICF Professional Coaches. And we'll keep the conversation alive. Feel free to join us and to look at the reports and the slide deck, so will be posted on the event page. And we thank you so much for being with us today. And of course, your CCU certificates will be sent automatically after validation of your presence. So thank you, Natalia. Your CCU certificates will arrive tomorrow at the latest, the day day after tomorrow, as we still have lots of events to manage for ICW. Thank you all for being with us. Wishing you all a great day, evening, or afternoon in your parts of the world, and see you very soon. Bye-bye.